Well, hey, Monday matters, and
Definitely.
today you're sitting in for JD. He's out, and we're going to talk a little bit about just where we are, and we're in Advent, and that's a fun time of the year.
Oh, I love it. It's a great reset. I'm glad we spend time in Advent leading up to Christmas because
Right.
it kind of it gets you back in and why we do this whole thing.
Yeah. So Advent, and it's such a funny time in the life of the church. When I say the church, I don't mean just Blue Mountain or Skyrocket. I mean, in general, it's such an odd time in that church has changed in the last 2 or 3 years. I mean, COVID was a reset also.
Yeah.
Talk about a reset. That was a reset. And a lot of people have reevaluated, how to spend their time and their money, and what about the habits that they have, and it's just an odd thing, and it's impacted every business, and it's impacted organizations and the church in a lot of ways. So,
COVID forced our hands, and when I'm about ready to, I'm going to say there's some good things that come out of COVID, and I'm not trying to toss away the sickness and the health and the actual effect on humans that COVID had. But we were forced to rethink things.
right.
Doors were closed, so what do? I know we had toyed before COVID with streaming our church services.
Right,
It forced our hand.
Right. In fact, I was kind of against it. I'm like, why are we going to do that? If we stream it, it'll just be easier for people to stay home and watch at home, and then they won't come to church. That was before COVID. That was where I was, for sure.
And it's a very real thing, and that whole balance between COVID has made staying home easier for people. We've given them permission. We've talked about that. We've talked about the mental health issues that come along with that.
Right. Staying home, being isolated, rather than gathering together in a community. Yeah.
But then also in the same point in time as a church, we really had to figure out if we're supposed to go where the people are. Well, they're at home. How do we get to them? So
Right.
it definitely forced that. We had to rethink how we do things, and I think we're constantly rethinking it. I know one of the big questions that's always asked with COVID is new normal, or when do we go back to normal? What is
there's no
normal
back-
even
yeah,
in
right.
anymore?
Well, I think that is a really good question, because normal is not the same as it was before, and it's not I think this generation will be impacted by this event forever, and our patterns are different now, and that's just the way life is. And it doesn't mean it's the way life will always be, but the patterns change significantly, and so what will the new patterns be?
Yep. I definitely think going back to a pre-COVID period will not happen.
Yeah.
It will not look the same. And I think in some ways we're probably missing out if we think it is going to go back. If we just sit and wait for it to come back to that, you're probably going to miss the train.
Right.
So it's tough, and there's a lot of it's polarizing because a lot of people want to go back to the way it was. They like the way that it was.
Well, sure.
But then you have a whole generation of people that they don't really know what it was before. My kids will not know what life before COVID was like.
Yeah.
So
Isn't that a weird thought? Wow. I mean, so COVID will be around, and it's not going to be what it was for us. And as we reflect on it, one of the things that they were telling us with the lockdowns, the shutdowns, all this stuff, they were saying we don't know if we did the right thing or not, and the only way we'll know is on the other end of it. And I think as we look back on it, probably some of it was too strict.
yeah,
The lockdowns probably didn't help. Even a lot of the sickness today, I was talking to somebody who was saying their doctor, this is secondhand information, their doctor was saying a lot of the kids' sickness right now that's going around has to do with the fact that we were so, kids were wearing masks and we were sanitizing, and kids weren't exposed to very many germs. And so their immune system, yeah, thanks for saying that, was impacted by that. And so now these new viruses and everything comes around, and they get sick.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, you spend a year in a mask.
Right.
And while it does
More
help,
than a
there
year.
is benefit. Well, now I guess they're somewhat saying that there maybe not as much benefit as there was,
Right,
but the thought process was there's
Right.
benefit, but then there's after effects, and I think
Yeah, and I didn't mean to get into that too
Yeah.
much, really. That probably doesn't. I mean, that is all beyond our control. So, what do we do as the church? Here we are. We're the church, and that is, we have this mission, and we were placed on this mission by Jesus when He said, "Go into all the world and make disciples." And so here we are, in a world has changed and shifted, and yet the mission hasn't changed and the mission hasn't shifted. So how can we be the church going forward from here? And some of the ideas are to continue moving. We started streaming our services. We need to stay online. That's important. We
Yeah.
know that. So how are we going to stay online and yet stay in person? Because in person's critical.
I think a lot of conversations need to happen. I think decisions made on a whim, and this is kind of funny for me to say because I'm kind of a rip the Band-Aid off kind of person.
Yeah.
But I think you need to, I guess, to go back just a little bit. We had read an article that said, what would you do if you were a startup church, if you were creating a church new?
Yeah.
In some ways, COVID is giving every church an opportunity, whether it was existing or not, to almost be a startup to, hey, if we were starting a new church, how would we do it? But I think there's the balance. I think the ultimate goal, and I think as Christians, what we're called to do is be in community and together.
Yeah.
So how do you work in the internet piece, the distant education or the opportunity for people to go online? Well, there's a ton of people online, so we need to be there. But I think you have to have the common goal of the end goal is to how do you get someone in a seat? And even with unselfishly thinking about it, if I can get someone in a seat at a church in their town, maybe it's not here, then I've done a good job by using technology to reach them.
So I'm going to push back on what you just said the end goal was. I don't think the end goal is to get someone in a seat. I mean, I think having them in a seat is important because it connects them with the rest of the body. And so I think that's really important. And I don't think you meant that when you said it. So and here's why I don't think you meant that. I mean, the end goal is to make disciples, right? And so that's what we want more than anything. And being in the seat helps us disciple them. But that's it's just, okay, so let's go online for a second. If I'm watching online, I'm watching the online service, it's really distracting to be at home for me, for Jim.
Mm-hmm.
And I only did this a couple of times. We, especially during, the dog days of COVID. I don't even know what you want to call it, but we were recording out, somewhere out around town, even out in the fields and stuff like that. I was recording my messages. And so then Sunday I would watch it because, we couldn't be here in person. Well, I found it distracting. It was easy for me to be doing something with the service on and not focused, not intentionally engaging, but it's more in the background. And I think that's a struggle with anything online. It's just easy to be on my phone Googling this or that, and that's online. I'm there, I'm attending, but I'm not really attentive. Ooh, I like that. I'm attending, but I'm not as attentive to anything. I'm not really singing with the songs because it seems weird for me to sit at home and sing with the songs. And I'm not really as engaged with the message because it's hard to stay in the moment. Whenever I can push pause and go do this and then come back. And
that laundry buzzer goes off and it's time to do laundry or dishes. And I think, so when we look at the way we're streaming currently, the concept is fly on the wall. So we're doing the whole service, the music.
Okay, you say fly on the wall. You're saying what?
It is recorded from a perspective of you're in the room as it's happening. It's the whole service. It's not built for online,
Yes.
but it is just a representation of what is going on inside that room. It has a tendency, if you're a fly on the wall, you're not necessarily involved in the conversation. You're almost eavesdropping into it. So if you pay attention to other YouTube videos that you watch, and since we stream to YouTube, I'll use that phrase. What types of videos do you usually, not the nature of the video, but like length of video, or how do you judge what you watch?
So I do watch stuff online on YouTube. Typically, if something is 25 minutes or something like that, I probably won't click it. If it's about 11 minutes is my threshold. So if there's a little story that's 7 minutes long, here's a little video that's 11 minutes, and if I really, really like the YouTuber or whatever, I might go to 25 minutes.
If it's a super high value, I'm sure a 25-minute, if you're going to go on a motorcycle trip, and this is about the location, you're going to be more apt to do it. But yeah, for the most part, when we're learning stuff, it's 11 to 15. I think a lot of the analytics say if it surpasses 20 minutes, you're really running a risk of people not paying attention the whole time.
Sure.
I know our analytics, a lot of it kicks in when the teaching goes on and then comes out. So what I'm learning from that.
Wait. Let's unpack that because I don't know that everybody understands what you just said. So what we're saying, what you're saying is the teaching kicks in. So a lot of people will log on to our Fly on the Wall service and they're watching it, but they'll skip past the worship segment and go right to the teaching.
Yeah, they'll bypass the announcements, music, and that kind of stuff. It seems to be, about 20 minutes into our stream, we'll get our spike. And then that spike will last, and our average duration a lot of times for a service is 25 minutes.
Right.
So we get that information. So that being said is when we go to look at how we're creating things for online, if online is something that we're going to go into, you have to start catering what you're putting online to the people that are consuming that. Because yes, if you have a 55-minute service, an hour-long service, music is horribly hard to represent at home.
Okay.
And especially when you have Spotify, you can put on Zach Williams or your favorite Christian artist and listen to some music.
Zach Williams, is he your favorite Christian artist?
Yeah, probably. I like that country kind of edge to it. So I can put those on and have my worship time. So I'm there for the teaching. And from a tech standpoint, every little flaw that you have is... sorry about that.
Is that a flaw?
Yes. Somebody needs to turn their ringer off when they're here. But you have to cater to what people are going to consume.
Right. Or they're not going to consume it at all. Or consume. I mean, we say consume, and that I hate that, actually, because when you think of church, we don't want consumers. We want worshipers.
Yes.
And that's a different... It's so weird because... we're dealing with a marketplace that has consumers and our attention spans and stuff like that. And yet we have this sacred message and this we think it's much more important than just consumption. So anyway.
No, it is tough. And there's a lot of, because it's to do the research and to try and figure out where we're fitting in, because we are going into... if we're going to reach people where they're at, it's having kind of a consumer mindset. I hate the word as well, but if you're trying to introduce someone to Jesus, and to how you do things and to have a better life, that we believe that a life in community, you're going out to where people are consuming videos, of people dancing, whatever it may be, their local influencer. So, you kind of, if you're going to meet kids especially, and that is kind of my motivation for what I do is I have younger kids. When they go on YouTube, I want to make sure they have wholesome, good content out there.
Okay.
So one thing that I can do is help put that content out there. That way, when they're choosing, they can choose to watch something Christian-based versus a whole bunch of dancing or non-value-added time wasters.
Okay.
So they can feel better about themselves and hopefully grow up to be Christians. So by putting that out there, I have to figure out a way to wedge myself into the non-secular stuff.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Yeah. Okay. So we want to be online and we want to be in person, and our goal, our preferred method would be that people would actually come to church and experience the worship, because there's something about gathering communally that we sense God's presence differently. And we experience the songs differently when we're singing them, and we're in the room filled with people singing them. And we experience the message differently when we're in the room and there's a moment that happens, and there we are in that moment. So obviously our preferred method would be that people would gather corporately, as the church always has throughout history. But man, we are in a consumer society, and then there are some people who are still really afraid to get out and re-engage in our community. Although, man, did you go to the Christmas parade?
My family went.
All right, your family went.
It was a little cold.
I mean, it's funny because people will get out and they will mingle and they will engage in things that they value, but church isn't always on that list. And, maybe it used to be there was pressure or there was habit, and it's just they're out of the habit, or the pressure isn't there anymore. I don't know what it is, but it's just easier for a lot of people just to be like, oh, I'm going to be in my pajamas and click it on.
It is safe.
Yeah.
It allows you to try out things. Decades ago, you just showed up at a church.
Right.
And you walked in and you kind of figured it out.
Yeah.
And you would bounce around to a couple until you found one that hit. Now the foyer is in your pocket.
Yeah.
Basically in your cell phone.
Yeah.
You can shop. I hate that word, but shop churches, find out what your fit is.
Yeah.
I'm that way. So
yeah, you can. In fact, we have people who visit church typically have attended our services online a couple or 3 times before they actually come in through the doors.
I hear that a lot more. I found you guys online,
right.
Or I saw that you were online. During COVID, we heard that a lot, and we still do. So it lets me know that there is value to it.
Yeah.
I don't always have the opportunity to ask them if they were attending somewhere else or if they're new to the faith. I'm always very grateful that they're here.
Yeah.
So I think the strategy with online then is you've got to figure out how to meld that all together. You can't just build online content that is just for people to sit at home.
Right.
You have
because we don't want them to just sit at home.
No, because being with other Christ followers in person, it's always better. I don't think you can beat it. I know if I'm going to have an emotional moment or really feel like I got hit, it's in person. Yeah. I don't know that I've ever been sitting on my couch and just been brought to some kind of emotional state from what I'm hearing.
Yeah. And the other aspect of that is there's something about receiving, and in person we receive better, but in person we give better too. I can interact with people and encourage people around me, or I could serve in person, but I can't serve in person. I can't serve online because now I'm just a consumer. I'm not a active participant. And is it really church if I'm just the consumer?
And that's where trying to leverage the social platforms that we have. Each social platform has its benefits. Facebook is probably the most community driven, where you can have dialogue back and forth. But I've definitely have seen communities, Discord's another one, where relationships are formed
right
in a digital sense. So I think it's trying to leverage and figure out how, instead of just having someone a consumer, give them something to respond back to, somehow get them involved and start building relationships. And I think that's where if you can figure that out, I think you can use technology and tradition for one common goal and get there. But the tough part is figuring that out.
And we have people, amazingly, we have people all around the world that check into our content. Actually even watch it, from far off places. And I'm amazed by that on occasion. I'm like, wow, we had a watcher from, somewhere far away.
Yeah.
In another nation. And I'm like, wow, how did they find us? What is that all about? But, so there's something, though, about a virtual church experience and a live church experience that I don't know. I'm still trying to wrap my head around. Have you ever heard of catfish? To be catfished by somebody, and so to be catfished means what?
To be fake, to believe it's something that it's not. Right?
Yeah, you think there's a relationship, or the other person on the other side is, one person, but in reality, there's somebody else, and, it just feels like it's just easy to pretend to be somebody that you're not. Now, if that is your way of connecting and that's your only way of connecting, it's okay. But it's a little bit like White Castle hamburgers. All right. Have you ever had a White Castle hamburger?
I love White Castle.
All right. So, wow. So in Indiana, that was a big deal when we lived there. White Castle hamburgers, and probably in Cincinnati, where you're from. And so there's something about a White Castle. You go in and you smell those onions and you taste it, and you're there. Now you can buy frozen White Castle burgers at a grocery store. Are they as good?
I would not touch them.
Yeah, there's something about it. It's prepackaged, and maybe it's all the same stuff. I don't know, but there's something about
it. Seems imposter, and I assume it's somewhat how it's cooked. But yeah, it's not going to the microwave.
But it is still the same meat, right?
Is it meat?
I don't know if there's any meat in White Castle. How do I see? None of this is scripted, and so that's how this happens. We talk about hamburgers.
But I think it's important, and I know that the catfishing and the authenticity, and it's tough, and you'll probably never get away from that. When you don't have someone on screen, especially if you're just doing text communication, that person can be anybody that they want to be. And it's kind of difficult, but I think eventually you can hunt for sincerity, and I think eventually the truth comes out a lot of times.
Yeah.
But I think that's, it's very important with churches, because authenticity is something that a lot of the younger generations really look for.
Right. Right.
So you need to do whatever you can to make it as authentic as possible. I think having, a lot of those chat, whether it be Twitter or Discord, you can do voice communication instead of text. So then you're starting to pick up inflections, conversations. And that can help. So it's trying to build the most authentic situation you can, and make it as personal as possible with as much interaction. You want to have a situation where people are watching church at home, if this is their first introduction to church, that they are inspired to invite their neighbor over or their friend. And now all of a sudden you got two people in the room.
Okay, so now you're talking about something a little different there. Now I'm not just a consumer, but I'm actually drawing people into this whole experience, almost like a watch party, if you will. And together, then you start to create community also.
I think it almost goes back to the home churches. We were doing some research on our history, because we're at the 125th year in our history. They start with home churches, and we're almost in the small groups, and that can be where a church starts up, and then it's being led by someone that they trust and believe the theology and can follow, and then that can start to spread into communities.
So if I invite somebody over to my house and we're going to watch this together, now I'm less likely to be doing laundry or less likely to be distracted on my phone. We're intentionally engaging in this community together, and that's different than just being a consumer.
You have open dialogue at that point in time. Now, it may be different. During your teaching, they may break out into conversation in the
Right.
middle of it.
Did you hear what he just said?
Yeah, and then
Somebody
they'll have
check
a
that fact.
conversation. So they may, yeah, you will have a few fact checkers, I'm
Yeah,
sure.
right.
But they'll go down rabbit holes, and I think that's okay. And I think we have to understand that that's kind of the education aspect of church at home. Yeah. They're learning things, they're figuring things out, and they have those conversations. Hopefully those conversations wait till the end, and we can help foster that by having questions that are posted that they can go to. And that just goes into building a scenario where at each walk, there is a solution to that is online.
Right.
You watch a sermon, here's 4 or 5 questions. They can have the conversation with their neighbor, with their wife, their husband, their kiddos, whatever it may be. And then that engagement then gets more people to come.
So the idea with the questions, we do have small groups right now that meet, and they have sermon questions that they go through every week, and that in itself causes you to listen a little bit more intently because you know that there's going to be some questions, and so there's trying to engage just a little bit more in that.
Helps create that focus for sure.
Yeah. So is the future of church in person, or is the future of church online?
Yes. So I think the in-person part is important. And I think it will always be there and be the ultimate goal is to create disciples. And I think you do that best in person.
Yeah.
And then send them out. Where I think technology comes in is it gives us an opportunity to do church in some way every day of the week.
Right.
The doors can't always be open at the church. You cannot always be available to have a conversation with someone. But if we can sprinkle in enough things to where now people can come to church virtually every day of the week, learn something new. It's a Bible study, a way to get them engaged. Then I think they can marry together.
Yeah, I think there's some other things that, we create content here all the time. And if you missed Sunday, then you missed that content, and so it also allows that content to perhaps live longer or go further.
I was gonna say, I think it can grow. You hit a deeper connection with it because if you foster your questions on Monday and Tuesday that refer back to the teaching, it allows you to get a deeper connection, whatever the topic base is, or maybe answer some questions. I know we've all come out of sermons and are like, I want to research this a little bit more.
Have we?
I have.
Because I've never done that.
Well, that's because you got the next sermon to go to.
Right. The funny thing is about that, I research it all up front, and so there might be a fact that I missed or something like that. I'm glad. I really hope that people do ask questions about it. And who is it? It was the Bereans who would always go back and ask questions about the message, that they heard. And I love it. That's good. That means that even if I was wrong on a detail, somebody's checking it.
You kind of have, at least I have felt like the teachings are kind of a conversation.
Yeah.
I think this allows for the further of that conversation.
Well, let's talk about that for just a second.
Yeah.
The conversation idea. The idea with, calling it not a sermon, but a conversation is this. Here's the scripture, and this is that ancient, the word of God, that these ancient scriptures, and they are speaking to me, and then the Spirit of God is somehow getting through my thick skull or whatever. And so I'm working on a message, and so then there's my voice. So you've got scriptures, the Spirit, Jim, and then you've got the hearer, the listener, who is sitting there, and they're engaged in that process, and they're hearing these things. But at the same time, they have in their own mind, the Spirit is speaking, and they have their own they're processing it through their own filter. And so they're also in the conversation. They're not speaking it out loud at that point, but they are. There is this internal conversation. And then you join that with the sermon questions, and it can really take on its own life.
It definitely can. I know there's times it depends on where you are in your life and where you are in your walk. You hear teachings different. Or this point spoke to me.
Yeah.
where your thought process was, I thought this was going to be the big take home,
Right.
but somebody else hears something slightly different. And then I think it's great through technology, we can further that conversation and have well, I had this thought, and you're having this conversation. You're maybe answering a post, whatever it may be, and then someone responds, and it allows for a dialogue. It gives, in some ways, technology can give us more access.
Yeah,
because
it's true.
And it's easier access. If I wanted to ask you a question, I had to show up to church during office hours. Mm-hmm. I could email.
Right.
To have that, and it can be a little clunky.
Yeah.
But now if it's all paired up, then you can have those conversations. People are more accessible, pros and cons. But
Sure, and you could probably even, like, say you had a clip from the sermon, a 4-minute clip that talked about a certain section of the sermon, and they could probably post a question, right? On YouTube, you can post questions.
Yep, you can post comments, questions. If it's on Facebook, you can have that dialogue as well. We try and have people that are always paying attention. And as we move further into technology, it's my job to not necessarily answer those questions, but get the right people in front of each other to have those questions answered and to communicate with those that are online.
Yeah.
And hopefully bridge that gap or answer questions or help them in their walk. Yeah. And make the place a little less intimidating too.
So my encouragement to people who are watching would be, do your best to not just be a consumer, but engage in the process as deeply as you can. Whether that be coming to church, which is my preferred thing, because it's different. But if you can't do that for some reason, watch with somebody. Invite somebody to watch it with you. Neighbors, friends, somebody. And you can watch it at a lot of different times during the day, right? I mean, you don't have to. It doesn't have to be Sunday
You don't
morning.
have to watch it live. It's always on there. We let it live there. And I'll challenge you, if you don't have someone to watch it with and you're watching it, write a question. Ask a question. I challenge you. I put it on myself to make sure we will get back to you in a timely fashion, and we will help you with those questions.
That's good.
We don't want you to just be a consumer of what you're watching. Question it.
So what we have as the fly on the wall experience, that is, we're looking at shifting that to a different experience, and it'll be more intentionally focused to the person who's attending online, and so it'll be easier, I think, to engage in that process in the future. But even now, you could still do that, but it'll be easier in the future.
I think so, and I think it will spark more specific questions. People will start to see small segments of your sermons that may answer a specific question, which will then link them to the full sermon if they want a full teaching, or if they want to listen to that. And then we'll be here along the way to go and answer questions and try and facilitate that the best that we can. Yeah. And tech can be scary. And I know a lot of the older generations, myself included and up, there's always new stuff that's coming out. It could be a little clunky.
So you just put yourself in an older generation?
I am in an older generation.
Is it because you have a big old white beard?
I think it's because I crossed the 40 threshold.
Oh, you crossed the 40, yeah. Well.
So, but there's things that I hear my kids or other people. I really try to get involved as much in the social aspect of things that I can. A lot of it for my own education, one, to help my kids, because I think this is something when my kids get older, there's a lot of scary stuff or things that can struggle. So I want to be aware and know how to use that stuff, but there's still, it pops up left and right. Church is going to look a little different. There are still a lot of the familiar things that are going on. But we're hoping that there'll be more resources that will be a better experience for everyone.
Yeah. And the danger for us is to make sure we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Correct.
And try to cling to the traditions that are things that we build on, and then maybe release some of the stuff that has become less, I don't know, relevant in a lot of ways, because it just it worked before COVID, but it just doesn't do it the same anymore.
I think the tradition stuff is the core.
Yeah.
I think it is the core. I think how we get to that core just looks different now.
Sure. Well, hey, it's Advent, and it's an exciting time in the life of the church. We have a conspiracy we're working on that we would love for you to be involved in. Maybe can I say, hey, we're going to have some kind of connection up here in this corner, and
You can say whatever you want, and I'll put it up there.
You will, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. And we strongly encourage you be here for Christmas Eve service. It's going to be great this year.
Yeah, 6 o'clock.
6 o'clock Christmas Eve. Bring your family. Be early. It's going to be a packed house. Masks are not required, but are optional. So if you're like, I don't want to go, and there are going to be a lot of people, there will be a lot of people. But
it's a big room too.
It's a big room, yeah. So
it'll be a good experience, and definitely if you come in, say hi to us.
Absolutely. Well, that's all I got. What else do you have?
I'm good. I think it's a deep topic, a conversation that will not deep and necessarily heavy, but there's a lot of avenues and things are going to change. So
yeah, it's moving, right? And it's not settled. It's probably not going to be settled. The moment we think it is settled and we have it is the moment we're going to have to tweak this or that or the other thing. And so we're in process of figuring it out, and it'll change again and again. So
yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
I look forward to it.
So Justin is the one to blame when things go wrong.
You can email me.
Email me it. Yeah.
So, all right. Well, it's been fun. Monday Matters. I thank you for having this conversation.
Absolutely.
We'll see you soon.
All right.